Welcome back to Third and Fairfax, the official podcast of the Writers Guild of America West. I'm WGA West member Brian Gary. While we were on hiatus this past year due to the strike, we achieved unprecedented gains, thanks to you, member strength, solidarity, and sacrifice. Now we're back with new episodes airing bi-weekly. In this episode's new Uniontown segment, WGA West member Jasmyne Peck speaks with educators Peter Gamble and Dara Resnik about how USC's Adjunct Faculty Alliance is organizing with the UAW, the United Auto Workers, to improve their pay and working conditions. Next up, to coincide with Black History Month, Committee of Black Writers co-chair Hilliard Guess talks with Writers Guild Award and Emmy-winning and Academy Award-nominated writer Cord Jefferson, whose credits include Succession, Watchmen, and his acclaimed new film, American Fiction. Hilliard speaks with Cord about the challenges of adaptation, creating Black-centered narratives, and more. Listen and subscribe to our Third and Fairfax podcast on Spotify, Apple, or Libsyn, and now watch us on the Writers Guild of America West's YouTube channel. And now, Uniontown.
Today we have Dara Resnik and Peter Gamble, two adjunct faculty members at USC School of Cinematic Arts. Can explain for us, like, people don't know anything about academia or higher education, like, what is an adjunct professor versus a tenured one?
Well, so back in like the 70s, about 70% of the professors would be full-time professors.
Yeah.
Right? And then about 30% would have been adjuncts who come in and teach a class or two. Over however many years, it's the opposite now. At SCA, it's 70% adjunct professors, 30% full-time and tenured, right? Now, I mean, there's great things about that because we're in the industry. It's an industry that moves really quickly. We can bring cutting-edge knowledge. There's things that are not so good about that, which we get paid a fraction of what they pay other people, a percentage of it, and that is a struggle. So I could say I've been teaching at USC for 14 years. I went to USC, undergrad, grad, came back a couple years later and started teaching. You do it in part because it's something you actually love. There's a real joy to teaching. There's a joy when every student is different. They have something different to learn. And when you figure out the key to that lock and you watch them expand and figure out that thing that was their weak spot before, it's joyful.
It's magical.
It is.
Yeah. Because of certain laws that were passed, if USC or any university now hires an adjunct like me or Peter who has another full-time job or part-time job, and this is just something that we do either because we love it or because we're filling in, if they hire us for 2 classes or more, they have to give us health insurance. So it also means that there have been cutbacks in terms of how many classes an adjunct, not only in terms of like there's been a pay stagnancy, a lot of people are losing their health insurance because of the way that hiring has been done. I mean, the thing that's really challenging about being an adjunct is everything that you're talking about in terms of having a full-time job, and then also, teaching your 2-3-hour classes on a weeknight. I'm a single parent, that's totally difficult for me to figure out how to do that, even though I love it. And then find time to read people's work and grade papers and do all the prep that needs to be done. And, when we're not working full time and not being paid fairly for that, it makes it really difficult to enjoy that work.
Yeah.
So
and as people that are clearly passionate about the work, it's a disservice to you and also to the students.
Yes.
I did go to the day that the AFA filed at USC, and it was beautiful to witness. I am an alumni of the School of Cinematic Arts, so I saw a lot of my old professors and people that I had learned so much from and felt supported by in my time at the school. And it was nice to return the favor a little bit. Yeah.
We appreciate it. You guys were awesome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. How is it going now? Did the school recognize the union as soon as you went in and handed them the paperwork? They were like, yes, we're so sorry.
Well, it's probably worth saying that, last semester we got 80% of the faculty at SCA to sign cards. We did it really quickly. It was very, very fast in terms of organizing timeline. And we did deliver our request to be recognized. They didn't voluntarily recognize us. This semester we're having a vote. The vote started yesterday.
So the vote just went out.
Yeah.
The ballots went out in
Okay.
the mail. It's old-fashioned mail
Okay.
ballots.
Okay,
So
we're doing pen and paper.
Everybody who is a current payroll adjunct will be
Okay.
getting one in the mail and needs to fill out the yes bubble by.
I think it's the 21st they have to get it back in.
Okay.
And on the 22nd, they will count them, right? So once they count them, they'll let us know shortly after that whether or not we're a union. I think we have got pretty good odds. But then, we're going to have to elect a bargaining committee amongst ourselves, and start bargaining with them. And, one of the questions, how long would something like that take? It's kind of like with the WGA bargaining with the studios. How long should something like that take?
It shouldn't happen.
Right.
Well, yeah, I
But-
mean, in theory, something like that shouldn't take a long time. But we know what people, that we know one of the tactics that people have is to try and drag something out in order to cause pain.
Maximum
Right.
damage. But, I think pre-polling suggests that this is likely to pass. That does,
Okay.
by the way, anyone who's listening and is getting a ballot, please vote yes,
Please
vote
vote.
early, send it in. Don't forget to do it.
Yeah.
I have done stuff like that, not, with anything like in this realm, but like just put it in the mail.
Check your mail, please.
Check your mail,
Please
put
check
it in
your
the mail, send it back to us. But I'm hopeful that if we get a large percentage, we will have a lot of power to say these are our demands towards fair pay, health care, hours, things like that. And they will have to, on some level, capitulate faster.
Yeah, and to that point, I think it's also a common practice outside of academia in a lot of industries where the people that they will hire to a shorter term span or with less benefits are the more diverse population of worker, so that they can not give them health insurance and not pay them equitably.
Yeah, this has changed a little bit since I started teaching at USC 10 years ago. I also graduated from SCA. I was a Starkey.
Oh, nice.
But I used to get students who told me I was the only female professor that they had.
Yep.
Which was really sort of wild. And yes, I think the perk of being able to hire a large adjunct from a large adjunct pool is that you can actually really diversify a lot. But that's also very valuable to the school, and that value should be compensated properly.
Yeah.
One of the things that's interesting is, so one of the reasons I taught there, the pay has never been very good.
Yeah.
It doesn't keep up with inflation. If you compare to what unionized schools get paid, it's much less. But you taught there because you could do 2 classes for a long time. You could get the health insurance, and that's been critical. In my life, my daughter wound up having a heart condition when she was 7 months old. She stopped breathing, in front of me, and I wound up having to do CPR on her, and she wound up having this heart condition. We had a heart surgery, and it fixed her, and she's beautiful. She's 13 years old now, and great. My kids had asthma. And they'd get sick, and it was like suddenly they're struggling breathing, and I would have to take them to the hospital to get a pill that is $2.50 that I can't get anywhere else. I have to go to the hospital to get it so they could breathe again, and I'd be there till 4 a.m. and go teach a class the next morning. But it gave me that we're in an industry that is notoriously difficult, and sometimes you don't get health insurance in a year, and this was a backup, to do that, and so. But recently, they started taking away second classes in health insurance. I noticed a couple years ago it was getting harder and harder, even though I get really good reviews, to get a second class. And I was like, what's going on? And I started hearing from other people. They were losing their second classes in health insurance as well. Some people were being promised they wouldn't lose it, and then they would lose it anyway. And so I kind of saw the writing on the wall, and I was like, I guess I got to go start looking for some other place to take care of myself. I lucked out. I sold a show to Fox right before the strike, and I, was like, I'm going to take a step away for a little while. And then some people reached out to me and said, we're unionizing. And I said, oh, shoot. Because I've been complaining about this for 14 years, and I guess now, we got to go try and fix things.
We've got to do something.
But, what people don't realize is that, we as professors, sometimes we're doing great. Sometimes we have years when we're not doing great and we're struggling, right? People think when they hear that we teach at USC that we make a ton of money for doing this. And we don't. You
I
know?
mean, sure, pay a ton of money to
Yeah,
the school.
I mean-
Where does it go?
You paid more for
Yeah.
one 4-unit class than we made to teach it.
That's
You know,
ridiculous.
a lot more, right?
You alone paid
Yes.
more.
Right.
Then one professor
Then
gets
one-
to
right.
teach it.
Yeah.
Right. And so I often would describe teaching at USC was like, drowning while doing something you love,
Mhm.
Yeah.
slowly drowning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we
but-
were just talking about this
yeah.
before this began, but one of the things that the university has been sort of saying as the momentum towards unionization has gained steam
Mm.
was that well, you're not really supposed to be an adjunct because you're supposed to make a living at it. You're just supposed to do it because it's something you love, which was the same thing that Carol Lombardini essentially said to the WGA, months and months ago, which is like, you're just lucky to have long-term employment.
Mm.
And I just keep wondering, like, at what point in capitalism do we get paid to do something that we love because we have to get paid to do something?
I believe the answer is never. Personally.
I mean, I think the answer is the only way to do it is to unionize, and
Right.
sometimes to threaten to strike, because obviously they're not going to pay us out of the goodness of their hearts and because we're good at doing our jobs.
Right.
I mean, Peter's one of the best. He is like a famous teacher at that school. Like
I had heard of Peter way before I met him. I was
Me
like,
too.
Oh, Peter Gamble. Yeah, face to a name.
Yeah. And the fact that the school might lose him because he needs health insurance.
Right.
Why does the school not want to provide him and his family with the safety of health insurance?
Yeah.
And if they're not going to, then we all have to make sure collectively that we do that for each other.
I wanted to ask, you brought up like last summer
Mm.
and the WGA strike effort. Are
Yeah.
y'all WGA members also?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And how did last summer affect the way that you approached the adjunct faculty, like unionization effort?
I'll just very quickly say that, like, I was so empowered by everything that you guys, I mean, that you were like so at the front of it. I like watched you on the strike line, and I was just a person who showed up a lot and tried to do what I could do. And it was that final meeting where they announced the deal. And I felt really good about this deal, but we didn't get everything we wanted, but
Sure.
we got a lot of what we were striking
Yeah.
for, and a lot more than what we had on May 1st.
Way more than what
Way
we had on
way more.
Yeah.
And I saw what the UAW was doing in other places, and I just had when I was approached like Peter was with, oh, we're unionizing, I was like, how can I help? What can I do? Because it was just such an empowering moment.
I had the same experience. I mean, it was such a well-run, action, such a well-run, well-communicated, like everyone knew exactly why we were fighting. That grid was so clear. You looked at it and you were like, this is just wrong.
I really loved the way the WGA handled themselves through,
Yeah.
and that, by the way, people who know me know me as a pretty fiery person. I'm very glad I wasn't on the negotiating
Yeah.
committee for the WGA or on the board or like in any position of power other than screaming at like Netflix, up at the building, because I think I would have been like the person that like tips the table over and like marches out of the room. I was glad it was like Chris Kaiser. He seems like exactly like the guy that
Very calm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like calm people.
Yeah.
But it has influenced, you can hear me getting fiery on the podcast, but like when we're talking behind the scenes about how to handle, things that USC is putting into the press or the quotes and stuff, it has influenced my ability to sort of go, okay, who's winning the PR battle on this right now? In a moment of historic unionization, is this something that we really need to reply to?
Right.
Or do we just
Right.
sort of leave it be and let them scream into the wind? Because the reality is this is something that has momentum and is very likely to happen.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's fascinating to see some of the anti-union rhetoric coming out. Like, we've been educated on things that they'll try and say and tactics that they'll try and use, and then you watch them do exactly what was said. The dean, when she was speaking, I don't know if I should say this, but kept saying, United Automobile Workers, United Automobile Workers, United Automobile Workers, to kind of try and make it sound like they're not an academic.
Sure.
They could also be called United Academic Workers because they represent so many academic workers. But this idea to try and make people feel uncomfortable with the idea of,
An automobile union representing us,
right.
right?
But they've actually been amazing. Their real role has been to come in and just educate us.
Yeah.
to say these are best practices. You know, it's not like they're the ones that are doing it. We have one or two people talking to us about this is the best practice and how you run a meeting. You know, this is how you build leadership. This is how you create a union that actually is unified because people get to know each other and work with each other and figure out how to do that. And that's been like the real story of this for me on the inside. When you're talking like the movie story, like has been two things. It's been watching people overcome fear because this is scary, and then they keep stepping up and doing it anyway, even though they're scared. You know, and you see that look where people go, I guess I'm doing this next thing, and then they do it, right? And it's really moving, right?
Yeah.
But the second part of it has been to watch a group of people. We didn't know each other. I
We're
taught for
meeting
14
in person for the first time right now.
Right.
Actually, we've been on a lot of these unionizing Zooms together, but we haven't actually met in person.
But like you'd see each other once a year or in the halls.
Yeah.
You never got to know each other, right? And in this course, this process, it's watching all these people who for 14, 20 years haven't gotten to know each other, and they're coming together and they're getting to know each other and they're becoming friends and they're working hard and they're uniting. It's really powerful.
Yeah.
I think that's what strikes me about your story, about like the script that you wrote that you go through.
Yeah.
That you didn't feel comfortable speaking up because you were alone, and the idea of walking into struggle in a collective with a group of people that can like understand your experience, and so you're not speaking up by yourself is so significant.
Yeah, and that's really similar again to the WGA. I remember, you know, as a showrunner who was one of the people whose checks were amortized out to story editor level weeklies and had been screaming into the wind for several years before the strike, going, "Is anybody else seeing this?" And felt completely alone. And then on the first day of picketing, was surrounded by a bunch of other people who'd been through the exact same thing. This feels very much like a microcosm of that. And obviously there's a lot of overlap for many of us. So we really are very grateful to the WGA for leading the way, because I don't know that this would be happening without these historic strikes this last year.
Yeah, I agree. We felt like the time was just right. It just felt like, you know.
Well, that brings me to my last question, which is like, how can we support AFA?
Follow
USC,
the AFA
SCA?
at AFA USC account.
Okay.
Amplify the message, repost, retweet, talk to your friends, post articles about it. Like if anybody in your life is, you know, having hesitation about that because they're sort of at USC and they're not really sure whether they should be supportive, listen to this podcast, send this to them. I think we just need to continue to have a positive message about what we're doing over there.
And if I can throw out, we're in a world where we're told so often that that we don't have power. We're told there's, well, what can we do? There's nothing we can do. But the truth of the matter is that when we come together, we have an immense amount of power. And so what I would say to people is look at that. If you see something that's broken in the world, ask yourself, how do I bring people together to fix it? You know?
Yeah.
You're here.
Amazing note to end on, I think. Thank you so much for coming out.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
You just heard WGA member Jasmyne Peck in conversation with Adjunct Faculty Alliance members Peter Gamble and Dara Resnik. Next up, host Hilliard Guest speaks with screenwriter and director Cord Jefferson about his acclaimed new film, American Fiction.
What's up, everybody? It's your boy, Hilliard Guest. I am the co-chair of the Committee of Black Writers, as well as the Writers Education Committee. So let's welcome to the show, everybody, my man, Cord Jefferson, out here killing the game big time. All my friends are super jealous of you, Cord, just killing the game, coming in 5, 6, 8 years. Next thing you know, you Oscar nominated and stuff. You know, every once in a while, God gives somebody that little fairy dust. So people are coming to take your legs, Cord. They're taking your legs.
I hope not. I hope not. There's enough to spread around. I feel like there's enough fairy dust out there.
Exactly. Jesus, man. Hey, man, welcome to the show, everybody. As I said, Cord Jefferson, Emmy winner, WGA Award, NAACP, Audience Award at TIFF. We could keep going. So many good things going on for y'all. His new movie, American Fiction. We're just going to jump right on in. Cord, so
yes,
let's just go back a little bit. Just tell everybody a little bit about you, how you got into the game, and like how you started writing. How did all that come about?
So I was a journalist for about 8 or 9 years immediately after college. I worked at a variety of different places. I worked in New York and LA. For a time, I was in DC doing some political reporting. So I was bouncing around always as a journalist, but I always had, you know, ambitions of becoming, just a writer, a more general kind of writer. I wanted to write books. I was interested in writing screenplays, but particularly Hollywood felt like it just felt like, if I didn't have any family in it, I didn't know anybody, I didn't really have any friends in the industry, and so I think that if you don't have access to it in that way, it can feel kind of impenetrable. And so I was always like, well, I would love to write a screenplay one day, but I have no idea how I would even begin to do that. And then fortunately, uh, a guy named Mike O'Malley, who was the showrunner on a show called Survivor's Remorse, he read some of my journalism and he reached out to me one day and said, uh, maybe you'll hate it and maybe I won't like you and we won't get along, but I would love for you to try to write on the show and become a staff writer on the show. So he reached out to me based on some of my journalism he'd read and asked me to come be a staff writer for the first season of Survivor's Remorse. And so I did that. I really loved the collaborative nature of it. Up until then, the writing that I'd been doing, it's a very solitary exercise. It's just,
Just you and your editor mostly?
exactly. It's just you and your editor and mostly just you and your computer, And so being in that room with a bunch of other writers that I really liked and admired and working with actors and directors and production designers and costume designers, all these people that make movies and TV shows work, that was just such a thrill to me. And it was like, I don't have to sit alone in my bedroom for hours on end. Like I can actually have conversations with people during the day. I fell in love with it and just started trying to, I didn't work for another 8 months after that. And I almost gave up and went just back to being a full-time journalist. But after about 8 or 9 months of hitting the pavement and sort of looking and taking a lot of general meetings and meeting a lot of other people, I got my second show on the Nightly Show with Larry Wilmore. And so Larry Wilmore hired me to
Love
come
Larry.
on.
Larry's
Yeah,
dope.
he's great. Larry's amazing. And he hired me to come be a writer on his Comedy Central show. And then it was working pretty consistently after that. And so
Let me ask you a question. I might be interrupting you a little bit.
no, please,
you
brother.
don't
Please.
mind,
Yeah.
a little more
No, man, I'm a
Let me-
verbose person, so please tell me to shut up whenever.
Two things that I'm curious for you, because one of the things that I get a sense of for you is not only can you write the most dramatic moments, you also can write the most funny, hilarious, satirist. You know what I mean? Like you really felt that part. When you describe yourself as a writer, how do you describe yourself? Just curious.
I just say I'm a writer, man. I think that ignorance sometimes can help you in sort of in careers. And I think that when I came into this industry, I was ignorant of the fact that people, some people consider themselves comedy writers and some people consider themselves drama writers. I didn't know that was just like a choice that people made. I was like, I'm a TV writer, so I just write TV, right? Like that's what life is. Life is neither comedy nor tragedy. It's frequently both of those things. So I can do both those things because I live a life that's both funny and sad. And so I never sort of like limited myself to one or the other. And so I think that kind of helped me early in my career because it allowed me to go from, from the Nightly Show with Larry Wilmore, sort of like this late night comedy show, to Master of None, which is kind of this dramedy half hour, to Watchmen, which is sort of like dramatic genre show, right? And to Succession, which is like a very funny hour-long show. Like there was just sort of I didn't realize that was strange to some people. I just felt like a writer's a writer, a writer is a writer. So I just call myself a writer.
When you're in the writer's room on a show, do you tend to pull back and give it a week or two to see how the rhythm goes, to figure out where your superpower or whatever you want to call it is going to exist? Or do you come on a show and when you meet the showrunner already get a sense of, and I know you're already now about to start doing your own shows, but as you were coming up, were you like figuring out your lane and like, oh, I'm strong
Yeah.
in that? Like, what was your thing?
Yeah, I think that's an incredibly important thing to understand is that if you're working for a good showrunner understands that everybody brings something special to the room, and that it's the same way that a baseball manager doesn't want to hire 20 pitchers. A good showrunner isn't going to want to hire 20 people who do the exact same thing. Well, and so, for instance, in the Good Place writers' room, that room was filled with some of the funniest people working in this industry, and it was filled with people who were stand-up comedians and improv graduates and people who had written for Saturday Night Live, like people whose entire thing was like, I want to be a comedy writer and I really love comedy. And like, so there was people in there who were just punchline factories were some of the funniest, quickest, sharpest,
Set
fun,
up
like
jokes.
their ability to come up with jokes on the fly was just wild to me. I can't do that. That's never been my ability. But I can write jokes if you give me a few days to go off with a script and write it. I can do that. But just sort of like as far as firing them off in a room, I can't do that. Or at least I couldn't then. Maybe I can now. I don't know. But I realized that what The Good Place also needed was, it's a show about philosophy. It's a show about sort of the ethics of the afterlife. It's a show with a lot of character development. It's a show with a lot of logic puzzles. And I was like, I'm very good with story. I'm very good with character. I think that these are things that I am good at. And so I just would realize that, like, when it comes to sort of like the pitch room where it's just we're punching up, the punch up room, we're just pitching out jokes. That's not going to be my time to shine. I can pitch something every now and again here and there, but that's not really where my ability lies. My ability really lies. So it was like when we're talking about structure, when we're talking about character, when we're talking about sort of like the logic problems, when we're talking about the ethical philosophy and what we really want to say with the show, and what the themes of the show should be, that was when I was like, okay, here's where I'm more additive to this and where I can show my worth and value. So I think that it's important when you go into a writer's room, I think, to just be honest with yourself. Be honest with yourself about what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't try to develop your skill set, whatever your weaknesses are, and get better at your weaknesses. But it just means being honest and saying, like, I may not be able to chip in the way that these writers are chipping in here, but I'm really good at this and I can do this really well. So I've always been focused on that when I'm in writers' rooms.
Yeah, and it's funny because you'll be in a room and it's really easy, even no matter how good you are, to get imposter syndrome. Especially
Totally. Oh
when
man.
you're surrounded by these beasts that that are just
and especially when you're black, I think that especially when you are a black, we know that a lot of writers' rooms are very, very, very white still. There is change, but there is still not a lot of diversity in some writers' rooms. And I think that it's very easy to feel like an imposter and feel like that imposter syndrome. And I think that it's important to realize that you are there for a reason. You were hired for a reason, and to, make your voice heard. When I first started out, I was very afraid to talk up in a writer's room. I was nervous because I was like, especially that first writer's room, because I was in there working with writers who'd been doing stuff for years,
You went in there cold too. Nobody told you how to do it. So
exactly. And so it was like, I was very afraid to talk, but I realized, like, at a certain point, it's like, you got to remind yourself, you're here for a reason. You were hired for a reason. They want to hear your ideas. They value your brain. And so that to me was always helpful in helping getting over the imposter syndrome. Was like, they hired me because they want me here. And so I need to acknowledge that I'm here for a reason and make my voice heard.
Right. I can't have you on here without talking about Watchmen.
Yes, please.
You wrote my favorite episode. I know we talked about this once
Thank
before.
you. Yeah.
I'm sure everybody tells you about it. It's personal to me because, like, 8 years ago, I wrote a Black Wall Street script that gets me in any room.
Wow.
And it takes place over just the 24 hours,
Wow.
happening after, the aftermath of it all. And when I saw the way you guys did it, I was like, they're on the right track of where I wanted to go. You know what I mean? Minus the sci-fi and all the other stuff.
Absolutely.
But the in-your-faceness about it, if that makes sense, you know what I mean? It felt like a horror movie when it came out. And that is the feeling that I know that team and that staff, put together there, that it's like, all of a sudden it goes from this, this movie where there's all these beautiful, successful, Black folks living better than some of the white folks, to holy shit, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Bomb has dropped.
Yeah.
I mean,
Literally.
Yeah.
Literally
Anybody can go.
Yeah.
And nobody's safe. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So anyway, I just had to say that just really quick. But
Thanks.
what was it like working on in that room for you?
That was a real privilege, and I feel like I learned so much. The two guys who have really supported me in the industry, besides, I've had like really great bosses.
Sure.
Mike O'Malley, who hired me for Survivor's Remorse, Larry Wilmore, who hired me for the Nightly Show, and then Mike Schur and Damon Lindelof have also been really supportive. And Damon, to me, to this day, is a really good friend and a mentor of mine. And so I was a huge fan of The Leftovers. I loved The Leftovers so much, particularly season 2. I mean,
Crazy.
when Regina King was there, it was just like sort of and Jovan Adepo, like I just really sort of like fell in love
Right.
with that show in a very real way. I loved season 1, but I especially loved season 2, and I was just obsessed with it. And so when I met Damon about 3 weeks after the series finale had aired for that show, and told him that I was a huge fan, and he emailed me about a month later and said, "Would you be interested in talking about Watchmen?" I'd never read Watchmen, and
Mm.
so and Damon said, "That's okay. It's kind of what I was saying earlier about like sometimes ignorance is good." Damon said, "I know Watchmen backward and forward. You don't
Mm-hmm.
have to know about it. I'm actually interested." It's kind of what I was saying again about children. I'm interested in the fact that you don't know anything about it because you
Right.
can come into it with your own perspective on it that might be different and great compared to what my perspective is on it. And so I went into that room knowing that I was there for a reason, and I think that I just learned so much, not just from Damon, but just we had like a murderer's row of writers in there. It's Janine Neighbors and
Mm-hmm.
Stacia Sekufor and Leela Bai, just people whose work I really admired from afar for a while. And so, and then I think that what really helped me in that room was that was the first adaptation I'd ever worked on.
Oh, okay.
And I think that in that the film that I made as an adaptation,
Right.
I learned so much in that room about adapting a book that I applied to the script when I was writing American fiction. And that is one of the big lessons that I really took away that Damon kept harping on was he would say, listen, we are building a world. So we sort of like we can do whatever we want. We sort of everything that happened in the original Watchmen happened, but we're adding brand new characters. We're putting it in a brand new place. We're sort of like adding this kind of imagined history also. And
Mm-hmm.
so it was like we are blue skying and we're going crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Every writer knows that looking at a blank page is both exciting and terrifying. It's
Facts.
exciting because you can do anything you want, but it's also terrifying because you can do anything you want. And it's like, how do I even start, right? How do I even begin this thing when I can do anything that I want? It can be paralyzing. And so in order to sort of like get over that paralysis and help us sort of like have some structure, Damon would say, we can do anything as long as it feels Watchmen. He would say, we all sort of like have a feeling that this book gives us, and sort of like we understand the emotion that is drawn out of you when you read it.
Mm-hmm.
And so you'd pitch something, and sometimes Damon would say, you know, that's a fine pitch, but it doesn't feel Watchmen. It doesn't feel like this. It doesn't feel like the essence. It
Right.
doesn't feel like the spirit of the original. And we want to maintain the spirit of the original in ours, even though ours is going to be wildly different. And
Right.
so that to me was something that I really thought a lot about when it came to writing American fiction was the idea that you have this book that you love, but you need to change it pretty drastically in order to make it a movie, and you can't sort of hew so closely to the text. You have to make some decisions that are going to change things. And so I endeavored to do that while maintaining the spirit of what the novel was, and maintaining the essence of what Percival Everett, who wrote Erasure, was trying to do. And in fact, he told me after the fact, but one of the reasons that I was afraid to approach Percival is because he had said no to other people who wanted to come along to adapt this book. He had denied people the rights. And
What do you think you did or said that grabbed him? Was
well,
it just passion, you think? Or
no,
was
what he told me after the fact was he said we spoke for about a half an hour before he gave me the rights, and what he said afterward was, uh, he said, I thought you understood the spirit of the novel. He said, I could tell.
it-
He said that I could tell that in our conversation you understood the spirit of what I was trying to do, and I knew that you would be able to capture the spirit even if you changed a lot of the story, that you knew what I was endeavoring to do. And so when he told me that was probably the greatest compliment that I received on the script, was that he felt like I was able to capture what he was attempting to do, even though it was different in a lot of ways, and I think
and
that
that's
that's the key.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things I'm always telling writers when you're trying to adapt something from something real. Like I get asked to do a lot of bio projects, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things that I'm always looking at is you can't always tell a cradle to the grave story, right?
No,
So how
no,
do you just focus on that part of it, like the new Ferrari movie, you know what I mean? Like he just focused on that summer, that 4 months, 1957, when
exactly,
Ferrari was going through this thing. And it's like, you can do the cradle, but when you do, you're really sticking by the numbers, you know?
exactly,
And so
exactly,
I like what you're talking about because it forces you to focus on what is the through line that's moving me. You know what I mean?
exactly,
And
exactly,
how does that thread only work within this part of the story? You know, and yet
exactly,
it feels like the entire book. You know,
exactly,
it's hard to do, but
exactly.
if you really lean in, you can find it, you
No,
know.
I totally agree, and that's very. I feel that that is speaking of Jeffrey Wright, like I love Basquiat. Like I really like that movie, and I think that that's another one that does that really well. It's like not Basquiat from birth to death. It's from Basquiat at this very specific moment in his life when he's sort of like ascending to fame and sort of like what that does to him. And I think that that's one of my favorite Jeffrey performances ever. But I fully I have I have yet tried to write a biopic. I think that it seems incredibly challenging, but I think that it's always the ones that I consume and enjoy. I think I always enjoy the ones a little bit more that just really focus on a specific moment in time for this person
Mhm.
and sort of like what like I think that one of one I think one of the most brilliant biopic scripts is Jobs, right?
Oh, right.
Is that Aaron Sorkin script, and just this idea that you can capture so much of an essence of a person just in three different speeches that they give, right? Like the moments before this big speech. And I think that's sort of like the magic trick of that, of allowing you to understand who this person is over
Mhm.
the course of their life based just on, you know, the half hour before they're supposed to give this tremendous speech in
Right.
their career. Like
Yeah.
that is just, I love that stuff. I think it's just such a great sleight of hand and a really nice way to encapsulate these things.
It's like I spent before we went on strike, I spent the last year working as number two with Ben Watkins
Oh,
for
yeah.
so I helped him staff like a couple shows and all that.
Oh, amazing.
It was fascinating to me because one of the things we have in common is we both write underdog stories.
Hmm.
I write underdog stories in the murder, death, kill world that deal with redemption. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So I'm always trying to find, so whenever people bring me in, I'm like, ooh, if we focused on her character though,
Yeah.
she's the underdog because so I think it's one of the things I loved about, what you did with Monk is he is an underdog character. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Not as
Exactly.
successful as he could be. Clearly, he's a genius and bright and all that other stuff. And that what he ends up doing is super easy to him.
Yeah.
That's the easy way to go. He's trying to challenge you. Be like, no, no,
Exactly.
look at this. Look at how much better this thing is. You know what I mean? And
Exactly.
everybody's like, no, we can care less. Give us Shaft. Give us the regular.
Yeah. And I
thing.
think and I think that that's what Jeffrey does. It's hard to play a lovable grump.
Mhm.
Hard to write somebody who's as antagonistic as Monk is, and sort of like still keep the audience on that character's side. Because there's a world in which the audience just from the beginning says, well, this guy's a jerk. I don't care about him. Who cares? I'm not rooting for him. And then you lose them instantly. And I
Right.
think that what I tried to sprinkle in there was this, was the understanding that I had this great therapist one time who told me that she
Wait, wait,
said,
wait. Black people go to therapy?
Black people should go to therapy.
Yeah, I
Believe me, I'll
know.
tell you, black people should go to therapy as much as possible. Therapy should be free for black people, I
I
promise.
agree.
Uh,
I'm teasing
and
him.
no, no, please. And so I had this great therapist who said once that she said anger is a secondary emotion, and that for especially for men,
Mhm.
anger is always hiding either pain or fear, and that sort of like underneath these
Totally
angry
makes sense.
outbursts is
Yep.
either pain or fear, and that men especially are afraid to say, like for me, it used to be the hardest thing in the world for me to say to somebody, you hurt my feelings when you did this,
Mm.
because that to me was not masculine to say. It was not
Right,
masculine to admit this hurt
right.
my feelings. It was not masculine to admit, like, I'm afraid, this makes me fearful, right? And
Mhm.
sort of like, and so instead of admitting that you're feeling these things, you just like chest thump and say like, well, I'm loud and I'm aggressive and I'm not afraid and you can't hurt me. And so I think the thing that I really wanted to make sure to include in the film, and a thing that I tried to write in, and a thing that I think that Jeffrey latched onto and really sort of brought through in his performance was one of the things that really keeps you on Monk's side is you see the pain underneath his anger, right? Like you see he's frustrated, he's arguing with his students, he's arguing with his colleagues, he's arguing with his family, he's arguing with his girlfriend. Like this is a guy who's arrogant and arguing constantly with everybody and picking fights constantly.
I know people like him.
Yeah, exactly. But what keeps you on his side is that like you see that he's hurt. You just see that you see the hurt underneath that anger. And it's like that is what I really wanted to make sure to incorporate in the writing of the film was that not just a jerk, but a jerk who had a real humanity and depth to him. And the reason he's angry is because he's in so much pain.
So this is, the Writers Guild podcast. So can you tell us a little bit about how you adapted, the book into a screenplay for one, and how long did it take you to write it? And once you got to that position, did you go to your reps? Did they look at it? How did you guys finally get it out and start, pitching it and whatnot?
Yeah. So the first thing so I found this book just through happenstance. I was reading a book review for a different book and it mentioned this book in the review and it sounded interesting to me. And so I went out and picked it up and I just intended to read it over, no intention of adapting. Just, I was like, it was Christmas of 2020 and I was like, I'll read it over the holiday break and just, just a fun reading exercise. But the minute I started reading it, I was like, oh, okay, this is interesting. This is really speaking to me. And it was like, within 50 pages, I was like, maybe I want to write the script and adapt this. I think that there's something to this. It was really resonating with me so deeply in a way that no piece of art had before or since. And so I sort of devoured it and quickly reached out to my manager and said, hey, you read this and see what you think. I think I might have sent him my copy or bought him a copy. I don't remember, but he went and read it himself and he said, I think I agree with you. I think that there's something here. And so then we reached out to his agent and his agent said Percival wants to have a conversation with Cord for about for a little bit. And so I think he and I started talking. He and I talked mid-January. And as I said, the conversation went well enough. And he said, I think you understand the spirit well enough that he gave me the rights for free for 6 months. He said, I really think that you understand it. And then so you can have the rights for free for 6 months, which is, rights conversations can take months, if not years sometimes. And so him giving me that.
And you're a busy writer as it is.
Yeah. And so him giving me that was just like really incredible. But then I'm a pretty slow writer. So it took, I think that it took me about 4 months to write the script. I don't write fast. I'm pretty, I know people who say that they can write scripts in like a week. That's never been my ability. And so, particularly things that aren't outlined or anything. So just from sort of like this beginning of the writing process to the end was about 4 months. And then we got it done. So then that was probably May of 2021. And then we took it out to producers and we sold it in July of 2021. And then it was
Did you have to give it back to him first?
That was he asked before he officially gave us the rights to send to producers. He said I want to read the script. And so that was exactly, man. That's the one thing with saying you can have the rights for free until you're done with the script, right? Is like, because now all of a sudden he doesn't have to you've written the script and he can say like, actually, I hate this. No. And so it was a very, very nerve-wracking 48 hours while I waited for him to read the script, but he read the script, he gave us the approval, and then we were kind of off then we sort of paid him, and then we were off to the races with the rest of it.
I see he got like producer credit and stuff, which I respect. I think that's great.
Yeah, man. Look, this movie doesn't exist without him. You know what I mean? I feel like everybody should get their due, and I'm happy that he got his due. Percival's since become a really good friend and a mentor of mine.
Now he's like, what other one do you want to do?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, he's actually talking about us writing something together, which I'm very excited about. Yeah.
That'd be dope. Okay. So what was the process getting Jeffrey? And I shot a pilot with Erica, maybe 5 or 6 years ago.
Okay. She's amazing.
Love her. And she had a nice supporting role, but her choices, like she's a scene stealer. Like she will walk into the room.
Oh yeah.
Steal the room with one line or one look. She was just amazing at it. And
so good.
Oh my God. So here's where I was going. I'm here's something that I loved you did. You did not cast some 25-year-old, 30-year-old actress to play his love interest,
Yes,
which is
sir.
what you always do.
Yes,
You
sir.
know, you
Yep.
brought in somebody who's appropriate to him, and it was nice for me, knowing Eric for so many years, to see her play the leading, love interest role, not just the funny character on the side doing whatever, which she could do in her sleep.
Yes,
You know,
sir.
and I felt like she really zoned into that. You know what I
Yes,
mean?
sir. Absolutely. I think that was you're dead on. The when we got, when we sent out the script and people started reading it, you get pitches from every agency in town about actors that you should consider. And there was a lot of women in their 20s and 30s on that list. And it was like Erica was always a person that I wanted to go to. I'd loved her work since Living Single. I was obsessed with Living Single when I was a kid. I thought that in many ways she was the heart and soul of that show. And so I'd love to work forever. And when it came time to cast that role, as you said, that actor needs to be formidable. It needs to be, because Jeffrey and this character specifically, there's so much gravitas to this character. He's so arrogant. He sort of like is constantly arguing with people. You need somebody who can meet that energy and sort of like give it back, who's not just going to get steamrolled by this arrogant professor, right? And so, not saying that women in their 20s and 30s can't be formidable. Of course they can, but I just feel like it's a little bit easier to believe when they're sort of like when the love interest is sort of like more equivalent to the age of the character, right? And sort of I wanted to make sure that this wasn't just typical like I cast a 27-year-old and she's supposed to be standing up to Monk,
Exactly
And
right.
so I thought that it was important to make sure that we brought somebody, and I think that somebody that immediately came to mind was Eric Alexander. I was like, this is a woman who um, is a little bit older,
Mhm.
wiser, smart, funny, effervescent. Like I knew that the character of Monk is prickly and standoffish, and we needed somebody in front of him who was going to elicit laughter and elicit smiles and sort of like just bring in a different energy into the scene than Monk is bringing, right? Because Monk is kind of this prickly, standoffish guy, and so to me, it was very, very important that we had somebody who could match that energy. And I think that Erica to me was just a standout from the beginning. And then I started reading the novel with Jeffrey in mind. Like that's how early I started thinking of Jeffrey
That's
was
smart.
when I was still reading the book the first time. I was
Mhm.
just like, this is Jeffrey Wright. This is Jeffrey Wright. This is Jeffrey Wright. And I'm very fortunate he said yes, because if he had said no, I would have, I had my heart set on him for like a year at that point. So if he
I
would have
think I
said no, I
always
would have been devastated.
I think I always figure out somebody, to have a voice, whether they ever
Yeah.
role or not. But for me, it just makes it easier to write the role. And
Right.
then it becomes like you can feel them, you could hear them, you feel them walking, like you could feel the way, whatever it is in their rhythms, you could just, do. And people are like complimenting you in the writing because they may not even notice that it was for Jeffrey, but you did. But they feel like
Exactly.
this could be like a Jeffrey Wright or,
Exactly.
this person, that person. I'm like, yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Let me ask you, how long was the shoot?
26 days.
Wow. Okay.
Very short. We were supposed to have 27, but we ended up with 26. So it was very run and gun. We didn't have a lot of time on our hands.
And you ended up doing it in, was it Boston or somewhere? What was it?
Boston, yeah. We did some Boston. We did some LA rather, but mostly Boston.
Okay. Okay.
So the college stuff, and obviously the final shot of the movie is in LA,
Right.
but the rest of it was in Boston.
Right. Because I'm one of those people, as a producer, I'm always looking at production value and looking at like, oh, I could tell this movie was this much money. I could just see it.
Yeah,
Absolutely. It's just one
Yeah.
of those things. And so, like when you guys went to the beach, and as soon as you guys got there and stayed there for a while, I was going, okay, this budget went up quite a bit all of a sudden for me.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? I'm like, oh, wait a minute, they're on the beach, on the beach.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I was like, I thought they were like adjacent, like down the
Yeah,
street.
no.
I was like, okay, Cord, I see you on your line pretty soon. Y'all know how to play,
Yeah,
you
we
know
did a
what I'm
lot
saying?
of beach scouting. We found like we had some great location scouts. We had some great production designers. We had a great cinematographer. We had people who really, really helped us punch above our weight class visually and sort of with the aesthetics of the film, who really made it look more expensive than it was. And one of, one of the producers is actually from that town. It's called
Okay, right
Situate,
on.
Massachusetts. It's about it's southeast of Boston, about 40 minutes.
Okay.
And he grew up in Situate. Actually, the house that we used for the family beach house, for the family cottage, was his old high school art teacher's house. We were location scouting, and she comes out and she goes, "Is that little Ben LeClaire?" And it was like, "Yep, I'm producing now," and we ended up using her house for that. And we fortunately got the one across the street for Coraline's house as well.
Let me, before I let you go, because they're telling me we got to wrap up. I have just two quick things for you. One,
Yes, sir.
I love the relationship between the older couple, and I knew
Peter
it
and
was
Lorraine,
coming.
yeah.
I knew it was coming. I told my husband this, which I thought was funny. I said we were watching it, and I said, and he turned. He was watching her. She went back in the house. He went, and I went, that is a black man. That is a black man who knows what
Yeah.
he. Okay. I grew up in the 70s in the Bay Area,
Exactly.
all the Black Panthers and all that. They would have saw a girl and went, minute. And I was like, yes, Cord, yes, keep that in the show. You know what I
Exactly.
mean? So
Exactly.
I just appreciated that relationship also, not to give anything,
Thank you.
but
Thank
because it
you.
was so real, they looked like real people, and to
Yes,
me,
sir.
I appreciated that.
Thank
The
you.
the other thing was, as a gay man, I actually appreciated what you did with your boy's character, with Cliff. I thought that was pretty amazing. The type you didn't dwell in his gayness,
Mm,
and
no.
I forget what the line was, but I remember me and my husband broke out in tears when he was having that final moment with his brother,
Monk.
with Monk. My apologies.
Yeah, no worries.
And he was telling him about how dad died not knowing who he really truly was.
Yeah.
And his line back to Monk about why it was important for him to know, I
Yeah.
was just
Oh,
all up.
man.
It was just
Thank
beautiful.
you. Thank
Yeah.
you. That is so a lot of that is taken directly from my real life. So I'm not gay, but my mother died 8 years ago. And one of my biggest regrets in my life is that there was a lot of myself that I hid from my mother, either because I thought she'd be disappointed in me, or I thought that that it was embarrassing or shameful for me to admit these things. And I really, really regret that now, because that is something that I think to myself, is that she never knew who I fully was, and she never will, and that really makes me sad. I think that one of the main themes of this movie is freedom, and what a lack of freedom does to people, and when people feel not free to be themselves, the crazy thing is that they'll do to act out because they don't feel free,
Right.
and sort of like what that does to a person's psyche, and what that does to their behavior. And so I think that for me, the two characters who I think resemble me the most, there's a little bit of me and everybody, but it's Cliff and Monk. And I think that it's these guys who have, which is why I think that, again, not to give too much away, but I think the real love story in the film is between Cliff and Monk. And it's these guys who, for different reasons, have built up these facades in front of themselves, and they hide themselves from the world, and they don't tell everybody exactly who they are and exactly what they've been feeling. And so I think in some ways, one of the things that frustrates Monk about Cliff is that he's seeing a guy who's finally becoming who he wants to be. And sort of like, yeah, it's a bumpy road, and he's going through a midlife crisis. Like, that's what Cliff is doing. It's like the same way that we've seen a million guys divorce their wives and start dating younger people and get their ear pierced and buy a convertible BMW or whatever.
Because he came out late. Is that what it is?
Yeah, exactly. So it's like,
I know a lot of dudes like him.
Yeah. So he's just come out. He's in the middle of his divorce. He's in the middle of all this, and he's trying to figure out who he wants to be and like actually live in his truth. And I think that that's one of the things that upsets Monk about Cliff. It's like, yeah, Cliff is kind of a pain in the ass sometimes, but what he also resents is that Cliff is finally becoming who he wants to be, and he's living out in the open, and he's saying like, this is who I am. And so that moment that they're having when he's saying like, man, I see what you're doing, game recognized game here, and I see that you're not being honest with yourself, you're not being honest with the people around you, and like that really is eventually going to break you. That's going to hurt you the way that it hurt our father. I think that to me was one of the most important parts of the movie, and it's one of the things that's really a part of, if I had made this movie 5 years ago, it would have been a very different movie, and I would not have made it as
You've
well
matured.
as.
You've matured yourself. So yeah.
Man, 5 years ago, I was Monk. 5 years ago, I was Monk and Cliff. I was not honest with anybody. I was not honest with myself. 2018 was this crazy year where I had a lot of career success, and I was writing on Watchmen. I was writing Succession. I was writing on The Good Place. I was having all this career success, and I was also feeling at the same time profoundly depressed. And it was like, how are all these good things going on in my life, and yet I feel miserable all the time? And I finally started going to therapy, finally started sort of like getting serious about being honest with people and being honest with myself, and trying to get past my own problems. And it changed my life the way that it's sort of like, you can see it change Cliff's life in the movie as well. And eventually, hopefully, Monk's life. So there's a lot of me in there, and those two characters in particular are very, very close to my heart.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Cord, man. So good.
Thank you, man. It's so great talking to you too.
Yeah,
I hope I want to ride Vespas one day.
Let's get it.
I'm still desperate.
I got 6 of them in my garage. So.
Are you serious? You have 6?
You see one of them right there behind me? Look, that's me. So yeah, man,
Well, I
I
gotta get
appreciate
one,
you,
man.
buddy. Hey, quick
It's great
question.
talking with you.
Can
Yes,
people
sir.
follow you? Where are you at? Are you on Instagram, Twitter?
I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Twitter less these days. I had my friend lock me out of my Twitter account because I do not have the skin. My skin's too thin to see what people are saying about me in the movie on Twitter right now. So I'll probably get back on there one day. But you can follow me there. I'm on Cord Jefferson, and then I'm on Instagram. I check Instagram a lot more. I'm a Cord Jefferson on there as well. So
awesome. Well, thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Follow us at WGA West everywhere. You could find us out there. I'm at Hilliard Guest. Thank you again to Greg and the whole team over here, and your team who helped us put this together. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, man.
And
thank you to everybody.
Thanks
Really
again, Cord.
appreciate it.
All
Thanks
the
for
best on
having
this
me.
movie, man. Go see this movie, and shout out to Issa again. So love y'all.
Shout out to Issa, and shout out to the WGA. I love you guys. Thank you so much. We'll talk
See
soon.
y'all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Third and Fairfax. You can listen and subscribe to Third and Fairfax on Spotify, Apple, and Libsyn. And now watch us on the Writers Guild of America West YouTube channel. Also check out writtenby.com, the Guild's newly relaunched online publication. See you next time.